Try it now. Yeah, it's working.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear. Thank you. Go ahead and mute.
Okay, thank you.
Rep Craig, can we do an audio check?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Great, thank you. Rep Van Duyn, can we do an audio check with you?
Sure. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. I call this hearing to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Let me begin by saying that standing House and committee rules and practice will continue to apply during hybrid proceedings. All members are reminded that they are expected to adhere to these standing rules, including the quorum. House regulations require members to be visible through a video connection throughout the proceeding, so please keep your cameras on. Also, please remember to remain muted until you are recognized to minimize background noise. If you have to participate in another proceeding, please exit this one and log back in later. In the event a member encounters technical issues that prevent them from being recognized for their questioning, I will move to the next available member of the same party, and I will recognize that member at the next appropriate time slot, provided they have returned to the proceeding. For those members physically present in the committee room today, we will also be following the health and safety guidelines issued by the attending physician. That includes social distancing and especially the use of masks. Members and staff are expected to wear masks while in the hearing. With that said, members will be allowed to briefly remove their masks when recognized by the chair for statement and questions. Otherwise, masks are expected to remain in place. I thank you in advance for your commitment to a safe environment for all here today. During my tenure on this committee, I have seen countless examples of how small businesses drive innovation. Technology has changed rapidly over the years, thanks to pioneering entrepreneurs leading the way. Congress has facilitated this innovation through investments in federally funded research and development, also known as R&D. As a result, federally funded R&D has produced countless inventions and discoveries that have changed our country for the better. From Doppler radar to computers to the first wind energy turbines, government-funded research has a rich legacy of helping launch groundbreaking inventions. But for innovative small businesses, it can often be a struggle to access early funding critical to building a new product. To reduce risks of investment in small businesses and encourage entrepreneurs to commercialize federal R&D innovations, SBA launched the Small Business Innovation Research, or SBIR, program in 1982. 10 years later, the agency launched the Small Business Technology Transfer, or STTR program to stimulate partnerships between small businesses and nonprofit research institutions. These programs are funded through federal set-asides of government agencies, extramural research, and development funds. SBIR and STTR have an impact on small businesses across a variety of different sectors every year. In FY 2020, agencies contributed $454 million for 1,030 awards to 744 small businesses. Not only do these figures represent an investment in our nation's small firms, they are also funding our country's future. Over the course of the last 3 decades, SBIR, STTR have funded small businesses that are now economic powerhouses. The programs provided companies like 23andMe, Qualcomm, Symantec, and Da Vinci Surgical Systems with the early funding they needed to develop new technologies and build their enterprises into what they are today. These programs also have the potential to address persistent barriers that hold back women and people of color operating in the STEM fields. Minorities often had a harder time accessing seed capital to pursue the creation of new technologies, and this program helps bridge that gap. Women hold less than 20% of U.S. tech jobs, and only 5% are in leadership positions at technology companies. According to a recent survey by Pew Research, Asian Americans hold 13% of STEM jobs, while African Americans hold 9% and Latinos hold 8%. These numbers are staggering and show we have a long way to go. And I may add, increasing the number of women and minorities who participate in the SBIR STTR program is a top priority of mine. Today, our country is at a crossroads when it comes to our innovative capacity, just as we were when Congress created SBIR STTR. In the latest Bloomberg Innovation Index, the United States dropped out of the top 10 entirely. Regaining our footing as one of the world's most innovative nations should be a bipartisan goal. If we are to accomplish it, it is vital that we utilize the power of small businesses. I hope that today's discussion sheds light on the importance of small business innovation, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to improve these critical programs. I now yield to the ranking member for his opening statement. Mr. Lukemeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to all. Thank all of you for being here as we examine the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer, or SBIR and STTR programs. Innovation is the engine that drives our economy. Technological breakthroughs and the entrepreneurship it spurs build our economy and creates new jobs by finding state-of-the-art solutions to difficult problems and capitalizing on those new products. This correlation is particularly important in the small business arena. Small businesses tend to be more nimble, responding to the market changes more rapidly than their bigger counterparts. They drive the innovation sector and make us more agile in the world economy. In this era of globalization, making it easier for small businesses to develop and commercialize new, innovative products is essential not only for America's competitiveness, but for its national security as well. This is why programs like SBIR, STTR are very important. These programs, envied and emulated around the world, were created based on the premise that small technology-based firms tend to be highly innovative and inventive, and that this innovation should be better harnessed by the federal government. Binding these new developed technologies with other federal R&D efforts was seen as a natural extension to both boost small business participation in federal R&D activities and to solve agency institutional problems, whether at the Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, or Department of Energy. All too often, good ideas never materialize because of a myriad of obstacles. It can be lack of funding, lack of understanding, or a perceived lack of a marketplace for the truly new and amazing technology. The SBIR and STTR programs bridge the gap between the fantastical and the practical while building our economy and improving the function of the federal government in the process. The small businesses that participate in these programs are rapidly pushing the boundaries of what is possible in a variety of fields. From supporting our warfighters to battling cancer and COVID, the SBIR and STTR programs are emboldening our small firms to contribute mightily to the fight. Current authorization for these programs is set to expire at the end of the next fiscal year. Getting a jump on this process is essential, and I'm very happy the chairwoman worked with me to schedule this hearing and to avoid our normal mutual problem here. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Today, we have an excellent panel of witnesses to discuss these programs and provide the committee with suggestions to make them better for small businesses and participating agencies alike. I'm looking forward to the hearing, hearing those ideas and working with my colleagues across the aisle and across the Capitol to draft legislation we'll all be proud of and support. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lukemeyer. The gentleman yields back. I would like to take a moment to explain how this hearing will proceed. Each witness will have 5 minutes to provide a statement, and each committee member will have 5 minutes for questions. Please ensure that your microphone is on when you begin speaking and that you return to mute when finished. With that, I would like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Dr. Joyce Todd, the Vice President of Research for 23andMe in Sunnyvale, California. Now, consider a startup unicorn worth approximately $4 billion. 23andMe received its first SBIR grant from the National Institute of Health in 2010. She joined 23andMe in 2007 and leads the research team, which is responsible for consumer health and ancestry, R&D, academic and industry collaborations, and new research strategies. She earned her PhD in genetics from the University of California, San Francisco, where she was a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow. Welcome, Dr. Todd. Our second witness is Ms. Pat Kitty, co-founder, CEO, and president of Aerosol Devices, Inc. in Fort Collins, Colorado. She is a past president of the American Association for Aerosol Research. Ms. Kitty received her Master of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Minnesota and holds 2 patents from aerosol instrumentation, with 3 more pending. Earlier this month, she was awarded a Businesswoman of the Year award by CEO Today. Congratulations, and thank you for joining us, Ms. Kitty. Our third witness is Ms. Rebecca Todd, the Innovation Consultant for the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center located in Little Rock, Arkansas. Ms. Todd assists technology-based small businesses and university researchers throughout Arkansas with navigating federal funding opportunities within the SBIR and STTR programs that support innovation with high commercial potential. She leads SBIR STTR training events and has strong working relationships with agency program managers and state funding organizations. Welcome, Ms. Todd, and now I yield to the ranking member to introduce our final witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jerry Glover serves as the Executive Director of the Small Business Technology Council, SBTC, a trade association of small, high-tech companies, most of whom are highly involved in the SBI program. Throughout the law's existence, he has been one of its most active supporters. Mr. Glover has a unique blend of private and public sector experience. A former CEO and attorney in private practice, he has testified before Congress over 30 times and appeared in over 100 agency proceedings, including rulemakings, adjudications, enforcement proceedings, predominantly within the SBIR and STTR program. He probably knows, or would be able to know what our questions are before we even ask him, Madam Chair. He obtained his undergraduate law degrees from the University of Memphis and an LLM in administrative law and economic regulation from George Washington University. Mr. Glover, we welcome your participation in today's hearings and look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. He yields back. And Dr. Todd, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Velasquez, Ranking Member Lukemeyer, and other members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify at today's hearing and share our experience with the Small Business Innovation Research Program. 23andMe is a leading consumer genetics and research company. Founded in 2006, based exclusively in the US with offices in California and testing performed in North Carolina, the company's mission is to help people access, understand, and benefit from the human genome. 23andMe has pioneered direct access to genetic information as the only company with multiple FDA clearances for over-the-counter genetic health information, and has created the world's largest crowdsourced platform for genetic research. In 2010, the year of our first grant application, we had fewer than 50 employees and minimal revenue from our direct-to-consumer genetics product. The business also had a goal to accelerate scientific discovery by developing a highly scalable, consumer-centric research platform. This platform needed a significant amount of investment in order to develop the infrastructure, breadth, and size needed to make it a scientifically valuable asset that would meaningfully benefit the company. Because we were a small business and because our mission was aligned with the mission of the National Institutes of Health, we decided to apply to the SBIR program. Over approximately 8 years, 23 applied for 10 SBIR grants and received 8. Reflecting back on our participation in the SBIR program, we believe that we saw 4 main benefits. First, our SBIR funded work helped us establish our scientific credibility. In total, the work funded by our SBIR grants produced at least 32 scientific presentations and publications. This credibility allowed us to realize the second benefit, which was the development of a commercially viable research platform. By 2014, paid research partnerships with industry partners made an important contribution to the company's revenue. The growth and development of the research platform also enabled the establishment in 2015 of a therapeutics development program at 23andMe. Third, our SBIR grants helped us to make a substantial contribution to the scientific community. The scientific publications mentioned previously shared genetic insights on conditions ranging from asthma and allergy to Parkinson's disease. More than half of those publications were written in collaboration with academic researchers at no cost to them. We have also used SBIR funding to improve the ethnic diversity of data in a protected NIH data repository for use by other researchers. Lastly, the SBIR program has helped us develop our early career scientists. The exercise of applying for and executing a grant builds very useful skills for the investigator, which benefits not only the individual, but also the company. The main challenge we experienced was the administrative overhead of running the grant, specifically the challenge of adequately meeting the accounting requirements. The accounting system requirements, which include time tracking on an hourly basis and audit preparation, were very intimidating, and even with help from our finance department, the team spent multiple hours every week on time tracking. Given the cost of setting up the accounting program, having a singular small grant was not really worth the effort. Thus, the dollar limit to the awards was also a disincentive to applying. Based on this experience, we have 3 recommendations. The first is to reduce the administrative overhead for time tracking and creating an accounting system. The second is to consider increasing the max award. Given the cost of setting themselves up to administer an SBIR award, some small businesses may be more motivated to apply for the program if the potential reward were greater. Lastly, we recommend continuing to fund venture-backed companies. In our early days as a venture-backed company, most investors were interested in the development of our consumer product rather than the research platform, and there was skepticism about our value as a research partner. Without SBIR support, it would have been more difficult for us to build our program. We see venture funding and SBIR funding as complementary resources to drive higher risk, higher reward, technological innovation, and commercialization. SBIR grants supported our scientific innovation at a time when we lacked the track record and credibility to get significant funding from other sources for our research and development work. We believe research and industry, particularly in small startups, will play an increasingly important role in innovation, and that the SBIR program can play a key role in nurturing that innovation. Though we are now too large to be eligible for SBIR grants, we appreciate the opportunity to express our support for this important program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Todd. And now we recognize Ms. Kitty for 5 minutes. Welcome.
I would like to thank Chairwoman Velasquez, Ranking Member Mr. Luetkemeyer, and the entire Committee on Small Business for inviting me to testify. My name is Pat Cady. I am CEO and President of Aerosol Devices, Inc., a small woman-owned business incorporated in 2014 in the state of Colorado. We develop advanced sampling and measurement instruments sold primarily to scientists studying the chemical and biological properties of airborne particles. Our method of gently collecting aerosolized viruses, including SARS-CoV-2, is considered by leading scientists to be the best approach for determining whether airborne virus is present, as well as the infectivity or viability of such viruses. In 2020, we had revenue of $2.17 million, approximately half in product sales and half in grants. We have 11 employees, including 9 with science and engineering degrees. We have been named by BizWest magazine as one of the 50 fastest growing private businesses in Northern Colorado 2 years in a row, ranking #1 in our size class in 2019. Most people recognize that starting a company is no easy task and often requires significant financial resources. This is especially true when developing a physical product that requires design, prototypes, testing, patents, regulatory approvals, tooling, and inventory. Having a good idea for a product that customers will buy is essential, but is certainly not sufficient for achieving economic success. 96% of the startup funding for our company came from the personal assets of the 2 co-founders, including myself. Our startup capital totaled $587,000. This amount covered the commercial development of our first product, but was insufficient for product refinement, global marketing, or continuing new product research and development. This is the point in our company history where the SBIR STTR program came in with necessary financial assistance. Since our first NSF STTR Phase 1 grant was awarded in 2017, we have been awarded 6 Phase 1, 3 Phase 2, and 2 subawards for a total of $4.68 million. Nearly half of our grants were awarded in just the past 12 months to address the COVID pandemic threat and to provide early warning of a bioterrorist attack. With an NSF grant awarded 1 year ago, we fast-tracked development of a compact, easy-to-use virus sampler that was launched into the market last week. The COVID-focused developments can also be used for measurement of other respiratory pathogens, such as seasonal influenza and tuberculosis. Our grant funding has come from 5 different federal agencies, demonstrating the versatility that our platform technology has for addressing a wide variety of industry and societal needs. Approximately half of the funding is a pass-through to our university and industry collaborators. We have partnered with 5 public universities and 3 companies, 2 of which are also small private businesses. The university collaborations support graduate students and help to build our nation's intellectual capital. Other products, at least partially funded by the grants, include 3 patent applications, 2 PhD theses, 3 refereed publications in journals, and dozens of conference presentations. Our primary interest lies in developing commercial products, not simply doing cool research projects. We look forward to the day when we can fund our own internal research and development without government support. Writing grant proposals and the reporting requirements and managing the projects is a considerable effort for a small company. A weakness in the SBIR STTR model is that there is no true funding to launch a product, what is called commercialization. Because of this shortfall, we are actively seeking an outside investor. But bringing on an investor has its own set of complications and is not the right path for all businesses. Until we reach that critical revenue milestone where we can truly self-fund, we are grateful for the financial assistance of the SBIR STTR programs. Our goal is to offer an increasing number of good-paying jobs and sell quality products to customers around the world. We aim to provide an exceptional return on the taxpayer investment. The SBIR STTR grants have been a lifeline for our small early-stage company. I strongly encourage Congress to continue and strengthen this vital program that provides essential funding for America's entrepreneurs and helps de-risk technology for potential investors. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kitty. Ms. Todd, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Morning. My name is Rebecca Todd, Innovation Specialist at the Arkansas Small Business Technology Development Center, or ASBTDC, based at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. I'm proud to be here and share some of the success that the Federal and State Technology, or FAST program, has brought to innovative Arkansas businesses. Hopefully, too, I can share some insight on how I believe Congress could and should expand the success of the FAST program. The ASBTDC has competed for and successfully performed on FAST grants, averaging $125,000 for one-year projects that are matched by the University of Arkansas at Little Rock and the state since 2010. This program has made an impact on our ability to provide statewide outreach about the SBIR Sttr program and related ASBTDC services. From 2016 to 2020, ASBTDC assisted mentees with winning 52 SBIR Sttr awards, totaling more than $23 million. The mentees that we serve through our FAST project are often too early stage to attract private investment, but their ideas for new innovations have commercialization promise. As the largest source of non-dilutive funding for early stage research-based companies, the SBIR Sttr program is critical to helping them successfully develop and commercialize new products and services. We continue to see sustained growth in our mentee success, both in number of SBIR Sttr proposal submissions and, more importantly, in awards each year. Since our 2010-11 FAST project, ASBTDC has seen a 467% increase in total number of SBIR Sttr awards for our mentee clients. Our participation in the FAST programs has positioned us as the state's leading resource in providing SBIR Sttr proposal development services. As a rural state, Arkansas has many geographic pockets of population that are underserved. They lack the awareness about funding opportunities available through the SBIR Sttr program. Our staff routinely travel the state and utilize video conferencing to offer formal and informal educational outreach specific to the SBIR Sttr program and related ASBTDC service offerings. For example, I traveled to a historically Black university and met with new faculty and staff of their aquaculture program, which is the only PhD program of its kind. As a result of this outreach, 2 faculty members of this program engaged in services to submit SBIR applications to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. ASBTDC has used its participation in the FAST program to cultivate strong statewide partners over the last decade. Through referrals from these partners and through word of mouth, new ASBTDC mentees learn of our center's SBIR Sttr services and expand the reach of our program. Mentees are often inspired by success stories from current ASBTDC mentees. Women leaders in innovation often serve as speakers at our training events, and their SBIR Sttr successes are featured in our Center's Lab to Launch newsletter. For example, women horticultural company GSS Group won USDA SBIR Phase 1 awards on their first try after engaging our center services. This company's CEO has been a strong champion for our center, leading to a number of new mentee referrals from other ag tech companies. The success story in our Lab to Launch newsletter and in our YouTube SBIR Success Stories video have attracted attention from other women researchers across the state. As the number of programs for innovative entrepreneurs continues to grow in Arkansas, particularly at the university level, it has become increasingly important that ASBTDC grow capacity to effectively serve the expanding potential mentee base. In essence, the FAST program has enabled us to establish a network of support for small business innovation and provide access for all small businesses that wouldn't have existed without the support of the FAST program. While the funds supporting our efforts have been limited, ASBTDC has still managed to help a number of mentees successfully win SBIR and Sttr awards since we're proposing its FAST projects. We believe other underserved states similarly benefit from the ability to access the FAST program funds to increase SBIR and Sttr programmatic outreach and services to their populations. The FAST program could offer greater value for grant participants if the amount of the grants was expanded. This would support increased staff capacity and more varied programmatic offerings. If the FAST grant performance periods could be extended to 3 years per project, to allow FAST awardees like ASBTDC to expand efforts and dedicate more time to existing and new programmatic offerings. The more that FAST awardees like ASBTDC can cultivate SBIR Sttr success for small businesses across the country, the greater the economic payoff in terms of growth in the number of new innovative companies, high-tech, high-paying jobs that will attract top student talent from our universities, and new solutions for technological challenge areas. benefit for every state that participates in FAST. As word continues to spread about Arkansas' success in growing innovative companies and jobs around their founders' scientific passions, the motivation for emerging companies to participate in the SBIR STTR program will continue to grow all across our state. This has been a successful model for Arkansas, and we believe that it can and should be replicated.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. And now we recognize Mr. Glover for 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Jerry Glover, Executive Director of the Small Business Technology Council of the National Small Business Association. I had the privilege 40 years ago of testifying before Congress in support of the SBIR legislation. At that time, the U.S. was the world leader and worldwide leader in innovation. We dominated the venture capital world. We had the best education system and the strongest patent system in the world. America's small business, the most innovative sector of the economy and a wellspring of entrepreneurial energy, but received only 5% of federal R&D funding. Today, about half of venture capital investments are made overseas. 83% of all venture capital seed investments, early stage investments, go into just 4 industries and to a limited number of states. Our patent system is severely weakened, and small business still receives a very small portion of the federal R&D dollars. Small business, with the help of the SBIR program, is still the most innovative sector in the U.S. The SBIR program provides seed corn for innovation, combining private enterprise with American ingenuity to enable innovations and federal R&D funding while building on the new products and new businesses to transform American industry. When it comes to worldwide competition, the United States, as the chairwoman pointed out, has dropped from 1st to 11th, not even the top 10. Basically, China is simply eating our lunch. The Beijing Institute of Collaborative Innovation has funded 150 U.S. universities' technologies. 108 of those they've commercialized. They have a venture fund now to develop these U.S. technologies of $616 million. Europe, the European Union, is funding 20% of its R&D to small business. That's about at least twice what the U.S. does. France has created a $13 billion disruptive technology fund. The one important thing to remember about the SBIR from an international competition point of view is it's the only program that requires funding to U.S. companies owned by U.S. citizens and the work be done in America. The SBIR program is working and working well. After 20 National Academy of Sciences studies, 4 economic impact studies that look over the entire, over half of the SBIR Phase 2 awards, we can clearly say that it is an engine that drives innovation in America. The return on investment for the Sttr SBIR firm program at the National Cancer Institute is 33 to 1. At DOD, it's 22 to 1. For every dollar invested, $3 of federal, state, and local taxes are generated. In terms of success, I can guarantee you that at least 3 technologies you use on a regular basis were funded by SBIR. The GPS on a chip, combining Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and the CMOS camera technology, all of which are used on in your cell phones. So you can clearly see that this, among all the technologies, there's a list of SBIR success stories in the back with our testimony. The market actually loves the SBIR program. 17 countries have copied it. As I pointed out, China has done an excellent job of copying it and taking it further. 10% of 3,000 SBIR firms have VC inventions. 829 SBIR firms have gone public. 1,300 of the have been acquired by other companies, and 70% of all SBIR all university licenses are going to small business, which recognizes the importance of small business to university commercialization. What is working with the SBIR program? 1, job creation. Small business created over 1.5 million jobs. We have an appendix, a state-by-state analysis of how many jobs are being created in each. 50 to 70% of all Phase 2 SBIRs are commercialized. GSA has done $4 billion worth of phase 3 contracts in the last 2 years. Likewise, the Air Force and Navy combined have done over $4 billion of phase 3 contracts. Agencies are speeding up their contracting process, but more needs to be done. We need to encourage innovation and support small business innovation by 1, making SBIR permanent, 2, doubling the SBIR Sttr program and restoring the Rapid Innovation Fund funding. We need to strengthen the patent system. We need to increase the federal R&D spending. We need to set a goal of 15% for federal R&D by small businesses. And we need to continue streamlining and simplifying the contracting process. If we take these actions, you will unleash new technologies for America while strengthening our economy, rejuvenating America's leadership in innovation. We can beat China and become #1 in innovation again if we effectively use the SBIR Sttr program. SBIR is like printing money without inflationary effects. $3 are generated for every dollar spent. A marvelous program that's working well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. And I will begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Todd, I would like to address my first question to you. One of the goals of the SBIR Sttr program is to increase private sector commercialization of innovations derived from federally funded R&D. Dr. Todd, how did early seed funding from SBIR help develop the genetic testing services available today?
I can provide a few examples. In the early days of 23andMe, the genetic health information we provided to customers was based solely on published research in the scientific literature. Today, many of our new genetic health reports are based on scientific results from our own research platform, the development of which was partially supported by SBIR funding. In addition, we have published 32 scientific papers supported by SBIR funding. Those results may be used by others in the scientific community to develop their own products and services.
Thank you. Ms. Todd, the SBIR and Sttr programs share 4 goals, and one is to foster inclusion and diversification among innovative firms. Yet this continues to be a challenge. One of my top priorities for the upcoming reauthorization is to improve participation of minority and disadvantaged persons in the program. In your experience, what strategies have worked and what are the greatest challenges to this effort?
If there are primary areas of industry and regions where large populations of these groups are based, it would be helpful if SBIR and Sttr opportunities were presented in a way that highlighted agency-specific research interests that aligns with these industry types. For example, USDA SBIR research topics might be highlighted in regions where aquaculture is a prominent industry. Sharing success stories of companies with team members who share demographic features of the groups that you're targeting for increased SBIR Sttr program participation is always helpful. Videos and feature articles and newsletters that have photos are a couple ways to communicate these inspirational stories. To encourage participation from HBCUs, highlighting the partnership opportunity inherent in both SBIR and Sttr would be particularly helpful. ASBTDC previously hosted an introductory SBIR Sttr workshop at a HBCU that featured SBIR awardees, both from local companies and their university subcontract leadership team.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. We hear time and again about the struggles that small businesses face in overcoming the valley of death, where research is derailed because of a lack of funding. This committee is dedicated to modernizing the program in such a way to better assist businesses in overcoming this stumbling block. To the panel, what have you found to be the best mechanisms to help businesses commercialize their products? Mr. Glover, I would like to start with you.
I think phase 3 of the SBIR program, which is no federal money and no SBIR money, it has been the single best. That's why I wanted to highlight how many billions of dollars are now going into phase 3s. We're starting to see that happening. It needs to happen a lot more. There are agencies that do virtually nothing in that area and don't have a good record. Some are just getting started, but phase 3 is an opportunity. The use of venture funding was the core for the first 20 years of the SBIR program as phase 3s. As they've gone to later stage investments, that sort of has waned. I think, that's the phase 3 is got to be the best way we can do that and make more focus where it's not SBIR dollars, but it's private sector dollars.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Kitty, would you like to comment?
Well, I would definitely agree that the phase 3 commercialization grants would be extremely helpful. We have never gotten one. The agencies where we've gotten our grants do not offer money for this. And so we have just had to do our own bootstrapping in terms of paying for the commercialization. And it's because we have a global product, it's also quite expensive to adequately market internationally. And so one of the things we are looking at is trying to start a search for investor funding. Investors are very risk adverse, so the SBIR funding is good for helping de-risk that. But so far we are determined, or we have been deemed too early for significant investment in terms of attracting a lot of investment money, but we are starting that path. But that is the biggest challenge, I would agree.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kitty. My time has now expired. I will recognize the ranking member, Mr. Lukemeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Glover, I'd like to start with you. One of my biggest priorities on the committee is to root out and rectify the waste, fraud, and abuse in every SBA-administered program. Recent audits that we've been told about here are very concerning with regards to this. So my question basically is, how are these two programs faring with regards to waste, fraud, and abuse in comparison to other SBA programs?
In the history of the program, I think there have been less than 20 waste, fraud, and abuse cases that have been brought, and that's 0.0001% of all of the SBIR programs. Because of the competitive nature, it's really tough to try to engage in fraud there. You've got to first win a phase 1, then win a phase 2. And it has been not fraud free, but has been very limited. And most of those cases involved university connection with the small business where they crossed the line and did something.
So the competitiveness of the program sort of minimizes the ability for fraud because it is not something that if you qualify, you automatically get the money. If you qualify for it, you compete for other people against that. Therefore, there's sort of a bump in the road there to prevent that from happening. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Todd, can you explain to me how the FAST program differs from the original Sbdc model of outreach and counseling, please?
I'm not familiar with the original model, but I can speak to some of the offerings of our FAST program. Would that be helpful?
The Sbdc model is such that they do have outreach. They do have counseling in it, and is that not what a big part of the FAST program is?
Okay, yes. So in addition to to the standard services offered through our center, through the FAST program, we're able to offer enhanced outreach specific to our technology clients across the state, including SBIR Sttr program exploration, proposal planning guidance and review.
I wish you would answer me rather than reading your answer. I understand what you're doing there, but I asked you a question with regards to the Sbdc model. It's not in your answers. Would you please answer that question? What's the difference between the FAST program and the outreach and counseling program of Sbdcs?
The FAST program allows us to create programs and other offerings of our own that we know will be tailored to address the needs of our audiences here in the state. So we're able to identify what the needs are among all
Okay,
of the,
that's what the FAST program
entrepreneurs.
is. You still haven't answered my question. So the problem here is that the FAST program for almost 2 decades, almost 20 years, has not been appropriated. The annual appropriation hasn't come through, yet they've been able to get the money for it. And my question, I guess, is why is it so essential that somebody apparently in the Senate keeps putting money in there in spite of the fact that it's not authorized? Do you have an idea on that?
We've been able to achieve lots of success in the state of Arkansas through the FAST program. It's allowed us to have more capacity to serve companies and aspiring companies across the state and help them with a very competitive and challenging process of preparing and submitting these applications.
You're doing it better than
So we have seen.
So you're doing it better than what the Sbdc model can actually accommodate?
We're able to expand on that through the FAST program to tailor it and make it our own, and that has allowed us to be successful here in the state of Arkansas.
Okay. Mr. Glover, you made a lot of comments with regards to the Phase 3 here stuff, and I think Ms. Katie misstated here when she indicated that it was money that they need for this from the standpoint that it's actually not a grant, it's a contract that the government, if I'm not mistaken here, has with the individual or the company through the first 2 phases, money is granted, and to the 3rd phase, you are then giving a contract to provide this good or service to the government or to whomever as the Phase 3. Is that not correct?
It is correct. The Phase 3 money from the government would be, in the case of the Defense Department, now $4 billion over the last couple of years, buying SBR technology and putting it in the field for the warfighter, or taking the technology to a further level of readiness so that it's
okay.
ready.
So you wanted the further dollars to the government to be able to purchase the whatever the innovation is that's being paid for through the SBIR program. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Very good. I see my time is up. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Time has expired, and now we recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crow, Chairman, Subcommittee on Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Workforce Development.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Keedy, last year you developed a product that helped researchers confirm that COVID spreads through the air, and your technology likely saved lives by informing scientists and policymakers on how to prevent infection. And your case also demonstrates why federal investments in R&D are so important. In your testimony, you mentioned that your grant funding came from the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, the NIH, Department of Defense, and Department of Homeland Security. Can you just briefly explain the differences between each agency's administration of the SBIR and Sttr programs?
All of the agencies have very different policies, procedures, web portals for submitting grants. They have different procedures for reviewing proposals and for funding. So each one of them we have to treat as an entirely separate thing. It would be very helpful if there was common portals and common procedures, but that's not the case today. We have only recently gotten grants from the DoD and DHS, so I'm less familiar with what all of that entails. We're just at the very, very beginning of those. I have the most experience with NSF, and they have lots of opportunities for learning. For example, we participated in an I-Corps program, which is about customer discovery. I think that's was initiated by NSF, and some of the other agencies have taken that up. So, but they're all very, very different. So we just really have to treat them all as a separate customer, if you will, and learn what their particular process is. It's
and you kind of got to my point by just talking about how more complicated it is, that you're having to review and understand and learn all these different entities, different processes. Could you just paint a very short picture for us as to how, if you had a common portal and a common process, how would that impact you, and what type of resources would be freed up for you to do the R&D that you do so well?
Well, thank you for that question. And I just think from an administrative point of view, it would save time in having to create the reports that are needed, submit the reports. I just think it would streamline the administrative side. The R&D, is unique for each grant, and so that doesn't change. But the administrative side would be much easier.
And then you mentioned that the SBIR, STTR has limited support for the final stage of development and bringing a product to market. What could be done, in your view, through these programs or through other programs to help businesses find investors for that final stage that is obviously so critical to getting it done?
So I appreciate the comment earlier about that there are phase 3 contracts, but only certain agencies issue those, and DoD being one of them. We've just started with them, so we haven't gotten that far yet. NSF does not, and I don't believe NIH does, at least not for the programs that we've had. Now, your question about how to help companies find investors, I think this is we've been very successful at getting the grants. We have so far not gotten an investor, although we're trying. And we need to learn how to investors because they are looking for different things. And I would just say that an investor is a long-term commitment, just like a marriage. You're entering this relationship for the long term, at least until you exit, have an exit. So you have to be very careful about who your partner is. And so that the investor and the company's goals are in alignment. And so that's what we're seeking. We're confident we'll find an investor. We just haven't yet.
Thanks, Ms. Keaty. I know I hail from your home state as well, from Colorado, and we're all very proud of you in Colorado. And the picture behind you of the mountains is making me anxious to head west. So I will be heading your way shortly. Thank you for your testimony, Madam Chair. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Now we recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams, Vice Ranking Member of the committee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Small Business Administration under President Biden has had problems overseeing programs for the past few months. Just to name a few, there has been miscommunication between the Inspector General and Administrator Guzman, fraud with the EIDL program, and delays of implementing critical funding programs like the shuttered venue operator grants. The SBIR and the STTR programs discussed today are carried out by several agencies, but are overseen by the SBA, and before we authorize these programs, we must ensure that proper guardrails are in place so that both are fulfilling their intended purpose in helping small business grow. So, Mr. Glover, what recommendations can you give to the SBA for these programs so that we can avoid some of the problems we've seen out of the agency this year and some of those that I just mentioned?
Well, the SBIR program relies extremely strongly on competition. And it has been targeted for agents for they've looked at everything very carefully. And quite frankly, they found very little. And I think it's because there's so much competition. Quite frankly, it's tough to win an SBIR award. It is very hard to do. And you don't find somebody who wants to commit fraud having to spend that kind of energy putting it together. It's reviewed primarily by scientists who are familiar with the technology and familiar with the area. It's hard to convince those, it's hard to con those reviewers. So I think the SBIR program is fortunate in that regard. But I think that there is a problem with the agencies that could be doing more phase 3s. We've been talking to the Department of Energy about their cost sharing. They have, for follow-on grants outside the SBIR program, and even for phase 3s, cost sharing. You have $1 million award, you have to come up with $200,000. Small business just can't do that. So basically, small business is shut out of all of the DOE's follow-on non-SBIR funding. They get less than 3% there. So it's a problem, but it's a problem that is diminished because of the way the program was carefully structured at the very beginning when it first started and what we've maintained throughout its history.
Let me move on. Thank you. Innovation drives economic growth and gives America a strong presence in global markets. Many of these innovators start out as small businesses with great ideas, but maybe do not have the knowledge on how to expand operations to get in the pipeline for federal contracts. Often there is excessive amounts of red tape, administrative burdens that make it overwhelming for small businesses to attempt to do business with the federal government. So, Ms. Tung, you mentioned in your testimony that this can be intimidating for scientists who are not familiar with this process. So can you discuss personal challenges you experienced with the application process for 23andMe and how we can cut red tape to streamline proposals for SBIR and STTR programs?
Sure. So I would say that our primary challenges were not with the application process itself, which I think was relatively straightforward. I think we were more intimidated by the rules that we saw afterwards for setting up an accounting system and for tracking time, because that's how we got reimbursement for the funding that we received. So we were very fortunate in having a colleague who had done some accounting and auditing work, and so he helped us sort of understand and interpret the guidelines. But I would say some of our scientists, of course, were also scientists who had gotten grants in academia. And those sorts of R01 grants didn't have the same sort of accounting, auditing, and time tracking requirements. So, I think if you want to use those dollars to allow the scientists to spend more time on the actual research, I might consider reducing some of the auditing, accounting, and time tracking requirements.
All right, thank you. The SBIR program has had bipartisan support since it began during the Reagan administration. Each reauthorization since then has made significant changes, from increasing award sizes to shifting focus of the program to commercialization. Currently, it is set to expire September 30th of this year, or 2022. And as reauthorization conversations continue, we should be looking to make sure we are getting the maximum return on investment for these taxpayer dollars. So finally, Mr. Glover, can you explain the effects it would have on small business if this program was not authorized?
Well, the first thing, there would be 7,000 individuals and firms around the country that would not be getting money for their technology, to take their ideas, their technology, and even advance it at all. Given the fact that venture capitalists only make a couple thousand seed investments a year, that 7,000 SBIR is absolutely critical to fund it. It should be a lot higher. When we look at the rest of the world, we look at what China's doing. We look at even what the European Union is doing. Everybody else is doing more. They far past us. They've taken the SBIR program, copied it, and then made it bigger and better. So it would mean a lot of companies wouldn't have any chance at all to get their technology advanced at all.
Okay, thank you. Now I yield my time back.
The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize the gentlelady from Kansas, Ms. Davis, Chairwoman, Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And I'm, of course, glad we're holding this hearing to review the importance of the SBIR and STTR programs and how we can improve them as Congress must reauthorize the programs this year. These, as we've heard, these programs play an incredibly valuable role in our entrepreneurial ecosystem by providing support to innovators and entrepreneurs throughout their creation, development, and commercialization stages of their products and businesses. And the Kansas 3rd Congressional District, which I have a privilege of representing, has some pretty amazing SBIR and STTR funded centers and partners. Folks like the Mid-America Manufacturing Technology Center, the Bioscience and Technology Business Center at the University of Kansas Medical Center. These centers are invaluable resources to entrepreneurs and innovators who are looking to develop and advance their small businesses and to commercialize their products. But even with these awesome resources that we have in my state, Kansas has historically received a pretty low number of SBIR and STTR awards. In 2019, I had the chance to hold a field hearing in Kansas City, Kansas, to focus on what we like to call the Silicon Prairie and the technological entrepreneurship and innovation that's growing there in the heartland. And, these programs are essential in expanding and supporting the small businesses that we've got. I'd like to start off with Ms. Todd as an expert on bringing the federally funded, these federally funded R&D products to the marketplace. I'm curious if you could talk to us a little bit about the programmatic changes that would have the most impact on the types of businesses that you've been supporting.
Sure, thank you. So in terms of commercialization, many of the agencies have adopted the Technical and Business Assistance Program, even in phase 1. And I've seen here in Arkansas, it's been a great support for our companies as they're looking to expand on not just the research and development projects, but also to put into place practices that would help them further down the road as they plan their marketing sales strategies for successfully commercializing their products and services. So I would say one thing that would help is to have all the resources needed to help all of the agencies, even in phase 1, to offer these TABA programs for awardee companies so they can have those resources to be successful in commercialization. Also, many of the agencies offer programs that are on customer discovery, the I-Core model, and I think that would be helpful for all the agencies to offer. It's a key piece of successful commercialization to really learn about the market need and limitations of current solutions. So this is a great way for awardees to be able to ensure that their final technology really aligns with what those needs are, which typically change over time as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And then I kind of, Mr. Glover, I kind of want to piggyback on some of what you were bringing up earlier. I'm curious if you could maybe, if you have some recommendations about ways to support businesses through phase 3. You had mentioned that in your previous response. Just curious if you have some recommendations for us.
Well, one, getting a phase 3 from the government is part of it, but getting phase 3 from the private sector, we're challenged with the valley of death. We may sometimes make the valley of death wider, but we don't make it any shallower. And our venture capital, which had been the mainstay of American ingenuity for 40 years, it came shortly before the SBIR program really kicked in, really has moved, 1, offshore, and 2, to later stage investment. So it's really tough. Creating a program to help there. Angel investors are there, but they're not as busy as we think they should be. They're not making as many investments. So it really is a challenge. And what's scary is when you see other countries doing a better job of this than we do. So creating funds that will take technology to a next level, not necessarily SBIR funds, because we want to keep that program that's worked so well pure, but it's time for us to realize that we are in a competitive disadvantage and we need to create new activities, new opportunities. Basically, this is the only small business program for innovation out there. There should be more.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I yield back, Madam Chair.
Gentle lady yields back. Now we recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser, for 5 minutes. He's the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. Appreciate your input and your information. So, Mr. Glover, in your testimony, you say that the primary strength of the SBR program is invest early in innovation, well before venture capital firms and such. Yet, many companies receive the SBIR grant year after year. So, is that common, or is it usually they will receive it for 1 year, maybe 2, but not 8 to 10 years in a row?
Well, when we look at the government's pattern of buying things, what we see is that if you're a large company, we buy from them every year forever. If you're a large university like Johns Hopkins with $2 billion a year of coming in, everybody accepts that. For small business, we need small businesses at every level. Roughly 25% of all SBIR winners are brand new to the program. And that's been the truth for the whole history of the program. The government actually buys our research for technology they want for the government purposes. So a big part of one of the core reasons the SBIR program was founded in the congressional mandate is to give the government research that it needs. So there are companies, yes, that do year after year, and they do it because they're really good. It's a very competitive program. If they weren't giving the government the research they wanted for their programmatic needs, they wouldn't get follow-on awards. So you need the mix of all.
I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that. Been a small business person for almost 25 years, and I worked with thousands of small businesses over time, some doing business with the government, many with R&D budgets. I'm not sure I know of any that have actually received this. And our role here is not to be critical, but to provide oversight. So when the companies do receive these investments, okay, and the taxpayer dollar investments, do you review their EBITDA at the end of the year? What sort of financial disclosures go into it? I mean, if you invest $200,000, and 2 years later, their net earnings are $10 million, and their R&D budget is pretty substantial as well, does that perhaps disqualify them, or does that make them more attractive because you're seeing a perceived return on investment?
The criteria to be eligible for the SBIR program is 500 employees, and if you're a very wealthy company and doing very well, that's okay. It is perfectly legal under the program, and it happens.
But it's not necessary.
Many of our companies graduate. They get bigger. They get acquired by other companies. I have in the back of my testimony a list of 10 major DoD contractors that have acquired SBIR firms through the years, and a list of the firms they've acquired. One company, I think, has acquired 41 SBIR firms through the years.
Okay.
So it's a career ladder. If you try to fund only seed companies, you won't get the home runs. What we see in the program is.
Do you do a real ROI estimate annually on the taxpayer dollars that go in versus what the return on the company's growth? Do we do that?
We do it certainly for defense. Now, grants, some agencies do grants and only grants for universities, for small business, and for everybody else. Those grants are a little softer audits. The DoD audits SBIR firms. DCAA is very current working on that. So they do look at it, but what they're auditing for is to make sure there's no waste and fraud and that the money is properly spent. The terms of return on investment is what we've seen the National Economic Impact Studies show, and that's where you're getting 22 to 33% return on investment, and the taxpayer's getting $3 of taxes for every dollar they invest in the SBIR program at the National Cancer Institute and at DoD, which is well over half the program.
Okay. Well, I had a couple questions for Ms. Keaty to see what her experience is, but my time is about wrapped up, so Ms. Keaty, I may send those questions over to you if you don't mind. But I yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields back. And now we recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Mfume, Chairman, Subcommittee on Contracting and Infrastructure, for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you very much, and thank you for what clearly is a very important hearing to look at seed programs and other things that are available. I'd like to just, if I might, direct my question to Dr. Tung. I was going through your testimony, Doctor, and you mentioned that you had an 80% success rate with SBIR applications. And I don't know if this question may have been previously asked, but that just strikes me as an extraordinarily high number. And so I wanted, for the sake of better understanding this, to get you to talk about what you think is directly attributable to that rate. And can it be, or is it being replicated? So I'd like to know whether or not it's a matter of innovation, it's a matter of who the innovator is, or if it's a matter of the nature of the research, so that I might better understand how we get up to and maintain, I guess, an 80% figure success rate.
So, of course, I can't speak to the, to the grant review committees who are the ones who actually assess the grant applications. I can say that what we were told by our program officer was that, that the comments they had gotten back was that the quality of the science that we were doing was very high. It was like fairly unique. And, I think we also had a track record, to Mr. Glover's point of actually, executing on the things that we said that we did and really getting the results out there into the scientific community, because it is a competitive process. So I think that if we had not continued to do that grant over grant, my guess is that we probably would not have continued to receive them.
And Mr. Glover, may I go back to the line of questioning of the gentleman before me with respect to the average number of years that a business can qualify and get funded with follow-up awards. And I'm assuming, this is only my assumption, that there is no limit to that, or is there?
There is no limit to that.
Okay, does anyone at your agency review their earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization to see whether or not these businesses are growing or not growing the way they should be?
We have the agencies have had economic impact studies done that do analysis of that and show how many follow-on research dollars are given, how many follow-on jobs are created, how many, they've done a careful analysis of over half of all the SBIRs in the last 10 years. And so they look at all of that, they do detailed reports and provide those back to the public and to the agency and to Congress.
But are they also looking at the EventID of each one of those applicants that continue to get funded?
No, and quite frankly, I would urge you not to have that happen, because that's more paperwork and more challenge. This is a program that's primarily driven by science, the science and the innovation. And when we add different layers of review, it slows down the process. It makes the scientists take time away from doing the science and innovation and have to do paperwork. And one of the common complaints we have now is that that there is already way too much paperwork involved in the problem in this process.
Well, I'm sure the members of this committee would argue with you that there's too much paperwork that we're involved in, but in order to assure taxpayers that there's not any waste, not any fraud, not any abuse, I think that additional work in that area is warranted. I think it's justified. What I'm really concerned about, though, is that if I can get unlimited awards year after year because of my innovation, who I am as an innovator or the researcher or whatever, it seems to me that reduces the amount of money available for a larger pool of applicants who want to get funded, but the money is not there because if it's year 5, year 6, or year 10, one particular business continues to get awards. Could you just speak to that?
This is basically the only program that gives small business a clear window into the federal R&D research funding. And you got giant corporations, to get hundreds of billions of dollars of federal money. Small business needs this window open, and it has worked very successful. Remember, one of the missions is to give the government research that it wants. Without this program, small business is virtually shut out of the federal R&D research program. We need to open up more windows for small business.
Well, I understand. It just seems that without any cap on the number of years, business A could get these awards for 15, 20 years, let's say. And there are a ton of other small businesses trying to get in because they've got clear needs for innovation and research, but there is a certain finite amount of dollars available for that. And so if those dollars have eaten up because we don't try to get people in and graduate them out, it just seems to me that we're complicating the problem. But I'll yield back, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Is he on? Mr. Gabarino, I think that you're muted.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I just have a quick question. You know, this is a lot of good testimony, a lot of great answers so far about the SBIR program. But this is for really anybody on the panel. I know Mr. Crow asked about standardizing the template or the making things easier or standardize some of the paperwork. But based on the experiences with SBIR, do any of you have any specific recommendations? And I know some of you touched on it a little bit in the testimony on how to help improve the program and make it even better. And we can start with anybody could just jump right in.
I have one thing I'd like to mention that hasn't been mentioned yet. There is a significant time gap between receiving a phase 1 and a phase 2. And that can be very challenging for a small company who's trying to keep their employees on the payroll. Sometimes it's a 4-month, could be 12 months or more gap. And so you want to continue the work, but there is this challenge of how to overcome that as well.
So you would say making it more of a standardized time. I mean, a 4-month delay to a year delay, it's a big gap. What would your recommendation be? Just making it more standard or moving paperwork quicker?
I haven't thought about it in depth, but some way to streamline the reviews of going from a phase 1 to phase 2 would be helpful. We're also not guaranteed of getting a phase 2, so there's that uncertainty as well. Although the phase 2s have a higher success rate in general than the phase 1s, just because it's a smaller pool of applicants and they're already successful in having gotten the phase 1. But that is something that if there was a way that could be shortened, that period of time for review and granting award would be shortened, that would be extremely helpful as well.
I appreciate that.
If I may comment, the last year's NDAA required DOD to at least standardize, simplify, and expedite a contract award. The GAO did a study a few years ago that shows it takes 2 years to get between phase 1, phase 2 in many cases. There should be that oversight on that, making sure that in fact happens. There ought to be a standard contract for phase 1, a standard contract for phase 2, and a standard contract for phase 3. And once the decision made, it should happen. And that delay is costing valuable time, especially with innovation happening so fast and having such a short half-life. We got to do it quickly, and the government is years behind in terms of that area. You've hit a very sensitive area. I'll be happy to talk to you more about that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it seems like we get in our own way sometimes. So I think we should look into addressing that. Are there, from the other witnesses, are there anything else you'd like to add to that specifically, or any other ideas that we should be looking at? If not, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and I will recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Phillips, Chairman, Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, and Regulations, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and greetings to our witnesses. Thank you for being with us. I represent a district in Minnesota that's home to a number of the world's largest medical device firms, many of them founded and cultivated right in the Twin Cities and started in garages. And those are the great American success stories that we all love and wish to nurture more of. I, like many of my colleagues on this committee, are dismayed by the fact we seem to be falling behind other countries in the world. And my first question is on that subject to you, Mr. Glover. You had mentioned in your earlier comments that China and the EU have taken the SBIR model and made it, quote, bigger and better. I would love for you to take a little time and share with our committee how they've done so with some specifics so that we might be able to better understand how they've leveraged it and do better ourselves.
Well, they have steadily increased the percentage of their research dollars going to small business. And we footnote that because, quite frankly, most people don't believe it but it is going on. A few years ago, it was 16%. It's now up to 20%. So they're putting more money there. Now, quite frankly, Europe doesn't have the entrepreneurial spirit, the entrepreneurial drive that we have. but they're putting more money into it. So the main thing is more money. I highlighted the one Chinese institute because they set up they did 18 universities in China get together with dozens of universities in America to take U.S. research, collaborate with them, often, and suspect most times, the follow-on research and commercialization is done in China. But they've taken 150 products and gotten 108 of them into commercialization. Now, SBIR is 50 to 70% commercialization, but that's this is $600 million the Chinese government has set up as in effect, venture fund to fund those technologies that they are basically taking from the United States and developing over there. So, it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you. I mean, SBIR set up to be a U.S. company's U.S. ownership and the work done in the United States. Most other government research can be done elsewhere, and seeing our technology go overseas is heartbreaking. It should not happen.
Right, I couldn't agree more. Dr. Tong, I'd like to ask you too about your testimony highlighting the importance of maintaining venture capital as a source of outside cash flow for companies that are trying to secure other forms of early stage capital. Can you elaborate a little bit on the complementary relationship that you see between VC and the SBIR program?
Certainly. So I think, for us, we have a model in which our research platform is based upon a consumer research cohort. About 80% of our customers consent to participate in research. And it's those people participating in research that allows us to have this highly scalable platform. Now, the SBIR funding funded the research specifically, right? The collection of data, the analysis, the publication. However, the development of the actual online platform itself, all the design, all the product, all the engineering, all of that was, funded by venture funding. So we couldn't have done what we did without, the other part of the business having already been funded. So really those two pieces had to exist together or we would not have been able to build what we did.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. With my remaining time, if any of you might chime in, I remember when I was a kid in elementary school, business day was perhaps one of my greatest, forced us to have to think about starting a little business, generating revenues, identifying expenses, selling stock and marketing. And I just wonder if you see opportunities in the United States to inspire younger generations still in school about the possibilities of entrepreneurship and innovation. And are there any programs of which you're aware that we can go a little further upstream so that programs like SBIR and others will have even a wider universe to allocate resources to? You familiar with any programs trying to teach entrepreneurship to kids? Okay.
Well, I actually do have one thing, and this may sound facetious, but I actually do mean it seriously. There is a TV show called Shark Tank, in which people are allowed to bring their ideas in front of a set of investors. But it's not uncommon that you actually see very young people, teens and sometimes younger than that, who actually have been inspired by that show to bring their ideas into businesses. So I think that sort of thing, making it relevant and part of popular culture, is, I think, inspiring for a large portion of the community.
I agree. All right. Well, I'm running out of time. Thank you all. Appreciate this conversation and your testimony. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Kim, Ranking Member, Subcommittee on Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Workforce Development.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And I want to thank all the witnesses for being with us today to discuss these important programs. And thank you, Mr. Phillips, for asking the question and for Ms. Tong answering it, because Shark Tank is one of the programs I watch regularly too. Getting back to our discussion here, SBIR and Sttr programs are critical tools for small businesses to research, develop, and commercialize innovative technologies to create good paying jobs while increasing our competitiveness abroad. China and other nations are making concerted efforts to bridge that innovation gap with the United States and put more resources to commercialize their own technologies. So we must not relent our country's position as the world leader on innovation and the development of new technologies. So keeping that in mind, I'm concerned the Biden administration has yet to appoint an associate administrator in the SBA's Office of Investment and Innovation. So I'd like to pose this question for all the witnesses. Considering SBA's responsibilities under the programs, including agency coordination, policy guidance, and data collection, how important do you think it's, to have an associate administrator appointed as soon as possible? I know this could be a very simple yes or no question. Respond very quickly.
Yes, the Innovation Office should be report directly to the administrator. Yes.
Thank you. Other witnesses, your answer, yes or no? How important is to appoint an associate administrator right away? We need somebody to coordinate these important programs. You agree, right? Okay. Well, let me go to the next question. The Small Business Act requires the SBA to report annually to Congress on the SBIR and STTR programs. But unfortunately, SBA compliance with this requirement has been an ongoing issue. So if we don't have the timely reports, it's difficult for Congress to legislate and improve the programs. So in your view, what can Congress do to ensure SBA is meeting the statutory reporting requirements?
We mentioned in our detailed recommendations in our testimony, making the reports available as soon as the agency does them, put them on their website. In the old days, you had to filter them through. DOD, for example, the services have to send it to DOD, which has to review it, which sends it to SBA, which the SBA has to review. The SBA has to send it to OMB to review. So there's a built-in process. There's no reason all that information shouldn't be put on the web immediately. And so make those reports, in a much shorter time frame, but put them on their own website immediately.
All right. Do you currently, Mr. Glover, do you think that SBA has that online web portal that makes it easier for different agencies to put together their report? That way the SBA can put together an overall report to Congress in a timely manner?
The review process makes it untimely. So let's eliminate the review process. When it just put it on the web, be done with it, and move on. Right now, we've been working with DOE, and we're looking at inside DOE data. We're looking at things that they don't look at for years, but we're able to, through Spending USA, track down how many phase 3s are being awarded, what's happening. We didn't know that 2 years ago, but we can now do it. SBA could do it as well.
Thank you. I sense your frustration, sir. So I will, thank you very much. Let me direct my last question to Ms. Pat Kitty. With our experience of being women entrepreneurs, can you offer any advice to other women entrepreneurs who would like to participate in the SBIR program?
I appreciate that question. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that there's a huge funding gap from venture capital or investors in general for women-owned businesses. That needs to change. I don't know if that's government's responsibility, but that definitely needs to change. We start out with a disadvantage. I don't know if it's a bias or whatnot, but there's definitely a gap. I think when I started my career in the 80s, there were very few women in aerosol science, and now, there are lines at the restroom at the conferences. So I think we've made huge gains in terms of women participation in STEM fields. I find that the field that I'm in is very respectful of women. It's a very comfortable place to be, and so I feel that women should not hesitate. They just need to jump in. And
thank you. I know my time is up, so thank you very much, all the witnesses. I yield back.
The gentle lady yields back, and now we recognize the gentle lady from Illinois, Ms. Newman, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chairwoman Velasquez and Ranking Member. great conversation this morning. Thank you to all our witnesses. Learned a lot and appreciate our entrepreneurs so much. Having been one, I'm thrilled to see progress like this. And I will also just share a point with Ms. Keaty. I agree. When I was an entrepreneur, I pitched my idea to over 60 VC firms, and there was exactly one woman in the room. Exactly one across, and that probably meant about 150 people. So we need more women in entrepreneurial places, but also in VC firms, I will add too. Turning my attention to Mr. Glover, thank you so much for your comments today, sir, and really appreciate your recommendations. So if I heard you correctly, it sounds like, and I agree with this because it just, if you read the Wall Street Journal ever, it's clear that that's the case, but it sounds like over 80% of current funding goes to tech firms. Is that correct, sir? In the VC world, and PE probably too?
83% goes to telecommunications, the internet, healthcare, and it's on my chart in the thing. I'll go ahead. I'll come right back to it.
Okay, sure. So primarily tech. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
And that's VC and PE funding probably too overall. So knowing that, is there a possibility that you would be comfortable recommending and adding to your recommendations that we look at on our side of the fence, meaning this government-based program, balancing that out a bit and probably and prioritizing things like green technologies, green infrastructure, those in green building substrates, anything in the space in the 21st economy, green economy. Do you think that there's an opportunity to recommend, maybe not fully prioritizing, but adding some priority to green-based technologies as well as women and people of color-owned organizations?
There's always been a reluctance for the federal government to pick winners and losers. But when that was pre-China and pre the rest of the world, when I look at the Beijing Institute of Collaborative Technology, their focus areas are robotics, optoelectronics, structural and functional materials, energy technology, water treatment, and biomedical engineering. They're giving money in those areas, so they're doing it. In the U.S., we've got to get back in the game. I'm sorry. My answer 20 years ago was different. Today, they're doing it. We're not.
Yep, and I agree 100%. So I encourage you to put a little data behind that and suggest how we can prioritize a few areas. And certainly green technologies should be one of them, but maybe it is robotics and others as well, to reassert our competitiveness in the international community. Your initial comments were, I've certainly read it before, but startling. We have got to assert our competitiveness again. I think the best way to do it is to look at a 21st century economy and not look backward, which would include green technologies and, renewables and robotics and other such things. So I encourage you to include that in your recommendations, and I appreciate your work on this. And I appreciate all our entrepreneurs today, and I'll yield back.
Thank you. The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Scott Fitzgerald, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know at this point there might be some redundancy, so let me apologize for that in the questions. But to Mr. Glover, you talked a little bit about streamlining or just fully out eliminating specific parts of the process. But so without sacrificing and without putting into play waste, fraud, and abuse protections, the eliminations of those. Is there other things that, the paperwork burden for small businesses, as we move forward in technology, we should be reviewing that on a regular basis and making changes. Is that right? Or is this something that most of these small businesses are able to keep up with on their own?
When the SBIR program first started, they limited the proposals to 25 pages. It was virtually no other rules or regulations. Now the proposal and the solicitations that go out have 100 pages of rules, regulations, and procedures. It's gotten awfully complicated. Our guys don't like it. The small businesses, especially the new companies that come into the program, have to spend a lot of time trying to understand it. Having said that, they're willing to do it because that's the only way to do it. But should it be simpler? Should we have an automatic system? You know, yes, we need to go back to what was there when we first started. You got an idea, we'll give you $25K. You work on hard on it, we'll give you another $250,000 if you come back and things like it's working. So yes, the numbers are higher now because of inflation over time. But yes, we need simpler.
That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. And I would yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman, Rep. Carolyn Bordeaux from Georgia, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Georgia is home to countless innovators and companies that are on the cutting edge of new technologies. Georgia Tech's Enterprise Innovation Institute provides some critical expertise to businesses as they seek to bring technology and research-intensive products to market. And we have many small business incubators and accelerators that work closely with Georgia Tech on a variety of different projects. However, any product that relies on research and development of innovative technology is likely to have significant concerns around protecting intellectual property developed in these projects. So one question for Mr. Glover is, how do small businesses go about protecting the IP that's developed through these SBIR and STTR projects?
One of the beauties of the SBIR program in the IP area is that they are given their rights to that technology. And they have, the government cannot disclose that. There's some things that should be done to tighten that up because we run into battles and fights on the fringes. But the SBIR data rights is an important provision that's in there that helps us in many cases. But you're right, it's in those cases where the government really wants it, they demand to have, you give away your rights or we won't give you the contract. And that happens often, even though it's in the law, they can't do that, but they still do that, and they do that frequently. So data rights are critical.
What would you recommend doing to tighten that up?
We will come up, we'll get back to you on that with some specifics. It's becoming more of a problem recently. The Army especially seems to be really tough on that right now, but we've enlightened some of the services are better than others. But it is critical that you let small business keep their rights so they can go commercialize it. We know the government labs just don't do a real good job of commercializing. And small business, at least if they've got it, you've got a chance.
Thank you. Do any of the other witnesses have any thoughts on this matter? Okay. Moving on to another question, and it's Ms. Keaty, did you have something?
I was just going to say that, again, you know, as an entrepreneur, there is no free time in our lives. And so all of these things take time and effort, and IP is extremely important. We have patents pending right now. It's helpful to have TABA money to help support some of that funding, but that's just one more thing on our plate that we want to do right. And so any help we can get, it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Got it. I appreciate it. And just want to follow up on one other issue that came up earlier, which was that after the venture capital phase, launching into a larger business often proves very challenging. But I know that there are programs, there are tax credits, there are federal programs out there to help move into that next sort of mid-sized business phase. And wanted to check with you, Mr. Glover, do you have any thoughts about those kinds of programs and whether they could be, there's anything more we can do to enhance and help women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, but just businesses in general make that next leap?
The problem with R&D credits is that you have to have a profit to be able to use it against start. Yes, to be honest, our guys don't get profits for a long time.
Right.
Sometimes never. And so those R&D credits really don't help you. And the R&D credit, if you could sell it or transfer it to somebody who has money and you get some cash for it, some of the states have programs like that work. But look, we have done so little to help entrepreneurs in the innovation space. There's a whole bunch of things that we should have done and we certainly can do. And right now, in the competitive world we're in, we need to rethink everything we're doing. We need to come up with brand new ideas. Golding, why are we still giving less than 10% of your federal R&D dollars to the most innovative sector of small business? Why is SBI primarily the only program that really focuses on helping small business? It's outdated thinking. We are now in a situation where the world has passed us, and that's happening over and over again. And we've got to come up with new ideas and a new approach.
Thank you very much. I agree. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman, Rep. Pete Sbir from Minnesota, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as with every government program, finding success isn't always easy. When I first got to Congress, I assisted a small business obtain feedback from the Air Force regarding the SBIR application denial. They were never able to get a straight answer before my involvement, but I was certainly happy to help get things cleared up. I think this leads me to a question that any of our panelists can feel free to answer. Do some agencies provide better feedback to their applicants than others? Or more generally, do you feel that certain agencies make it easier for participation than others? Any of the panelists?
I just want to say, in particular, I'm thinking about some of the NIH reviews. It's really a bit of a crapshoot as to who your reviewers are, as to what, what kind of scoring or feedback you get. And so while I think it's really good to have outside experts reviewing these proposals, sometimes we get faulty information. I can say in one time where we submitted a proposal, wasn't quite in the pay line, and so we resubmitted addressing all the reviewers' concerns, and we got a worse score the next time. So that was a little bit frustrating.
Well, to that point, tell me what we can do to eliminate that issue. What's your solution?
That's a great question, and I'll have to think about that. I don't have an immediate
Okay.
answer.
And that's fine. So it wasn't a trick question. Those are some things that are important for us to hear to be able to change the regulations or rules to have the ability to accommodate more so. And then I also have the question, do you think standardization of paperwork requirements across agencies would help or increase population of small businesses and make them more likely to succeed? So the standardization of paperwork and maybe the vast majority of the process. And this is for any of the panelists.
It would definitely help. The challenge for new companies, if make it short, simple, clean, you'll get more people participating in the program, and you'll have them spend more time on the science and less time on the paperwork. So the more you can standardize and simplify everything in the SBIR process, go back to the way it was early on, you're right. Yes, it would be very helpful.
Okay. Any of the other panelists?
Again, I'm going to bring up a challenge, not necessarily a solution, but I think the success in winning grants is very much in a person's ability or a team's ability to tell a good story. And so there's a certain amount of skill in just writing the grants. And this doesn't necessarily, what about the company who has a great idea but isn't as skilled at writing or telling the story? I would hope that there's a way for those companies to also get to participate.
That's an excellent point. I mean, we're seeing some of the bigger companies hire grant writers and people that specialize in that, which would give them obviously a better opportunity. And we're looking for that small business who may not have the capital to hire an individual like that. So that's a great point, and we can't forget that. These grants, we have to really have them open and available for our small businesses as well. So thank you for bringing that up. Thank you to all the witnesses. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. My community is just outside of the city of Philadelphia. I as well am an entrepreneur with a technical background. And my first question is for Ms. Keaty. With your testimony, and actually also with many of the other folks' testimony, you've spoken about hiring an outside investor to help with the cost of commercialization for your business. In your experience, does the SBA offer resources for business owners who seek commercialization? Did the SBA offer your business any assistance on how to ensure commercialization on your aerosol devices?
I know that NIH and NSF have had programs where they have like a meet the investor kind of thing. But again, that it takes time to write the executive summaries, the pitch deck, to create the videos, and we've had no real strong connections. It's helpful in just, honing our message and thinking about what we would want to say to an investor. So I know they're trying. One of the things that we have found, and maybe it's our industry, is that investors don't necessarily value grants. What they want is traction in the market. And so it's that getting to market and having real customers and having real success is what attracts investors. Just having grants, yay, good for us, but it's not the magic bullet for getting an investor.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on that, largely what my role has been in all the entrepreneurial ventures that I've participated in has been the operator, the person who does operationalize, the idea. And so I do recognize how important it is. And in fact, that's why I introduced a bill with Mr. Balderson, Rep. Balderson, and it's called the Ramp for Innovators Act. And it talks exactly about all of the things that we've been talking about this time around, whether it's help with commercialization, whether it's help with IP and patents. It's those things that are the things that bog us down as entrepreneurs, that make us struggle with the next level of investment. And so I would love if I could ask you guys to share your experience, what worked and what didn't. What would you share as your look in terms of legislative ways to ensure that the SBIR and STTR investments are leading to commercially viable products or services and that next level of investment? So if I could, I would turn that back to you, Ms. Keaty, and then to anybody else who might have input in that.
Well, I would have to say that we're early in our journey in seeking an investor, and so I don't have a success story yet, but I'm very interested in learning what other people have done.
Could I ask Dr. Tung if she might be able to give us some ideas of what has worked and what hasn't worked in the commercialization area, and how we could be more helpful here in this body?
I mean, I think for us, it really did. I think, to some of the comments earlier, biomedical research takes a long time. A lot of these grants have a term of like a year and a half. And there are, it's very easy for, a research project to last 3-5 years. And so that is one of the reasons why, you do have to kind of look at trying to get grant funding over a longer period of time. And I think that was critical. It took us a long time and a lot of proof of concept of what we were doing was, high quality before we got to a point where there were, outside groups who were willing to, either pay us for our services or our products, or invest in that part of the business.
And Ms. Todd, do you have anything that you'd like to contribute here?
I would just say, as a support organization for these innovative small businesses, we always encourage scientists to be able to articulate the value proposition of what they're bringing to the marketplace as early as possible, rather than focusing so much on the technical aspects that maybe they're naturally more comfortable with. So we definitely help them to think through those processes through our consulting services. Also, as part of that, we have market research that allows us to dig pretty deep into potential in terms of long-term market potential, what the competition is looking like, demographics of their customers. I think all that feeds into helping them tell a good story about the commercialization opportunity when they write these applications.
I only have 15 seconds, and I appreciate all of your time. I guess my struggle is it's not about just the story. It's actually about the execution on the story and actually operationalizing things and actually getting patents and IP protected are hard processes, and that's indeed what the RAMP Act that we're trying to push forward is addressing. I appreciate your time, and I yield back. And I think I'm supposed to be recognizing Mr. Schneider. And so the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the witnesses for sharing your perspectives today on this critically important issue. Small businesses are the engine of our economy. As you said a moment ago, Mr. Glover, they are what drive innovation in our economy, and it's critical that we support them. And that's why having this hearing is so important. While the programs we talked about today have always been critical, they have special significance as we focus on the economic recovery post-COVID-19. This has undoubtedly been a difficult year for small businesses and for all Americans. But with vaccines being distributed throughout the country and restrictions being lifted, it is time to look towards the future. Small business innovation will be a key driver of economic recovery as we seek to tackle new economic challenges, get people back into the workforce, and adapt to the changes brought on by the crisis. I have heard from businesses all over my district about the lengths they have gone to just to stay afloat. These programs are instrumental in giving small businesses necessary R&D capital to innovate, which they often lacked prior to the pandemic, but which for many is totally out of reach now. Knowing how important SBIR and STTR, I have advocated in the past for allowing firms more flexibility in spending and for continued funding of these programs. Mr. Keaty, you talked about your recent experience as a business owner developing new technology using SBIR, STTR funds, and the limitations in using funds to launch the program. Can you talk more about what you could do with more flexible spending structure, as well as how challenging the road to profitability was under the current restrictions?
Well, we were in the fortunate position of having a product, albeit in a prototype stage, but having a product that was immediately useful for addressing the COVID pandemic for researchers in trying to determine whether or not the virus was airborne transmitted. And so we benefited this past year in selling to researchers. For us, the challenge in terms of flexibility of spending is the SBIR programs, by and large, just fund R&D. And so I think, for us, having more flexibility in, especially some of the phase 1 grants, having higher overhead rates so that we could hire help to do some of these other things. As entrepreneurs, we end up doing everything ourselves most of the time because we just don't have the staff. And so having more flexibility in how the money is spent would be helpful.
Great, thank you. I don't know if any of the other witnesses want to share your perspective on that. Well, with the time that's left, and maybe I'll start with Mr. Glover. From experience, if you were to pick 1, 2, maybe 3 things that we can do to have the biggest impact as we begin this recovery and get to the other side of the pandemic, what would you have us do?
I think I would first set a goal for small business R&D of the federal R&D dollars. We're spending a lot of our R&D dollars and have historically with other institutions, large firms, labs and universities, and small business is the innovator, and we send such a small share there. SBIR is primarily the majority of that money. So that would be the first thing. I think when we talk about paperwork, we could set a rate of return for small business of say 15%. We go in and fight on what the IRAD is going to be, what the profit level is going to be on contracts, and that's waste time, 7, 8, 9%. But the regs say you can go up to 15. Just automatically set that at 15, eliminates the paperwork there. I think that doubling the SBIR program would be twice as many companies would be able to have participate and fund their technology and make it move forward. I think the STTR program, the universities don't are challenged. 70% of their technology is licensed to small business. less than 1% does over $1 million. STTR should work, make the STTR program as big as the SBIR program, so that you get universities and have the labs participate and have a path to get their technology out of the universities, out of the laboratories, team them up with a small business, with a business plan that goes forward. I think those things would all be helpful. I'm quite frankly concerned elimination of capital gains taxes will remove an incentive for entrepreneurship. I would focus it just on small business, just on businesses and commerce, but capital gains for small business, especially technology businesses, should stay. So those are some things off the top of my head that would be meaningful.
But I've gone over my time. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't get to the other witnesses, but to everybody, thank you for showing your time today. I very much appreciate it. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired, and the gentleman yields back. Thank you again to our witnesses for joining us today. Your testimony is proof positive of what small businesses can create when they receive investment and support. Our country has a long way to go when it comes to reclaiming our title as the world's most innovative nation. We must examine the programs that have driven innovation in the past and work to empower them. The SBIR and STTR program has decades of demonstrated positive return on investment and funding of groundbreaking technology. And if there is no further business to come before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.
figure out when we get in there, but